Again, great job, everyone. Round of applause. This was an interesting debate because it started in one place and it went to an entirely different place by the end of it, which was interesting to watch this progression happen. Because a major component of your original argument was this discussion of abortion, and I don't even think you used that word in your last speech, which I just thought was interesting. You talk a lot about like saving children and stuff, but it's a different discussion, and I think it's kind of telling that in some parts the debate kind of got away from the government, and there were a couple of key arguments that you didn't really answer. This one that's really powerful is that only the rich people can afford it, and the best argument you have is that there's going to be like this black market stuff. We'll get into that later. But a bigger problem is opposition. You just kind of leave this argument. It's like they chose to ignore it and you went along with it. This doesn't get brought up ever again. And in terms of how this debate moved, I think you moved the most. You had all these arguments in the beginning, and then you had different arguments in the middle, and you had different arguments in the end. And it kind of started as, this is immoral from like a human perspective, and then in the end a major component was like there are certain things people can do and certain things God should be able to do, and we shouldn't cross that line. And that discussion wasn't as important in the beginning, but then was like it was all about the end. A couple of technical things that we should probably talk about. This cancer question that they asked that took up an unreasonable amount of time. The argument they're trying to make is, you said it's expensive, and therefore we shouldn't do it. The question they were trying to ask is that cancer medicine is an example of something expensive, but you still think we should use cancer medicine, right? That's what they were trying to say. On the government, you're asking just too many questions, right? Like after a while, it just doesn't look good when three of you are jumping up every 5 seconds. Like, I was really close to just saying you're badgering, you can't ask any more questions. But you have to be a little more strategic in how you ask questions, right? If all of you have stood up 6 times already, which I'm pretty sure you did, that's enough questions. You're gonna have to wait for another speech. It's almost harassing at that point. Does that make sense? Be nice to her, let her give her speech. There was no way these questions you had were like so crucial. She wasn't saying something incredibly offensive. And I get you want to ask questions, but you gotta limit yourself, gotta pace yourself, right? The black market debate was interesting in that originally the government brought it up, and it was your argument that this is happening. It's better if it happens in a controlled area. It'd be worse if it happened in the back of the rooms. But by the end, it somehow managed to become an opposition argument. Like the way you answered it in your last speech, you were very defensive, like you were trying to get away from this argument. But it was your argument. It helps you. So that was confusing, to say the least. In terms of the final speeches, I thought the opposition, you had all these good arguments, but you were really defensive in your last speech. Does that make sense? That you were telling me reasons why what they said was not true, but you did not tell me reasons why what they say is bad. Does that make sense? Right? You're saying they say they're going to save 1 million lives, and you're like, well, you're only going to save 100 lives. But saving lives is still good. So it's hard for me to be persuaded by those types of arguments. Does that make sense? That you're doing a really good job explaining, this is kind of morally gray, it's a little shady, there's some important questions that need to be asked, you could make mistakes, but none of these, there wasn't that big argument that's like, Judge, this is why it's bad. And it was in the debate at the beginning when you're like, the rich will be able to do it, the poor will not. It's going to be a messed up society, right? That was a great argument, but it dies. Just dies. Doesn't get brought up again. And if you did, I think you would have won this debate. but because you didn't have any real offensive arguments, I ended up voting for the government. But I thought this was a really good debate, and everyone should be really proud of themselves. Congratulations.
챔피언 팀이 거버먼 팀으로 들으셨죠? 거버먼 팀이 챔피언이 됐고 오늘 2012년 서머 디베이트 리그는 이걸로 마치겠습니다. 다들 수고하셨습니다. 감사합니다.